What is up, guys? My name is Lex. We are here at Seminole Hard Rock in Hollywood, Florida. This is my home casino. I live about 8 minutes from here, but I haven't put out too much content from this location lately because I've been traveling a lot. I went to Los Angeles, made a bunch of videos there. Before that, I went to Texas, made a lot of videos, and then before that, I was in Vegas. But I'll be back here in Florida for a couple weeks and be making content at this location and some other locations around the South Florida area. Today, we're playing $5, $10, $25 mandatory straddle. It's a $2,500 max buy-in game. Let's get down to the table. Let's get to the action. Let's go. Alright, let's jump in and break down some of these poker hands. This session starts off a little bit slow, but it definitely heats up by the end of the night. In this first hand, I raise ace-9 suited to 75 in a straddle pot. Only the big blind makes the call, heads up to 8-3 deuce 1 spade. I have 2 overcards, backdoor flush draw. I decide to c-bet here $100, trying to get him to fold out hands with equity against ours. Also maybe trying to get him to fold out smaller to medium-sized pocket pairs. He makes the call, and now we're heads up again to the 10 of clubs on the turn. This doesn't give me any extra equity. I don't pick up a flush draw, no pair, no straight draw. When he checks, I could give up, but I feel like a double barrel will get him to fold out those middling, smaller size pocket pairs like 5s, 6s, and 7s. So I bet $200. He folds very quickly, and we win. I fold for about an hour before finally picking up black pocket kings. Cutoff raises to 60. I 3-bet the big blind to 250 back over to him, and he makes the call. This particular player I play with a lot here at the Hard Rock. We just went back and forth earlier this week, showing each other big bluffs that we ended up getting through. So we have a little bit of history against each other. We're going heads up here out of position. 3-bet pot with pocket kings, and we get a great flop of 3 deuce 3 rainbow. The reason I think this is a great flop is 1, there's no ace on the board. 2, there's no middling connecting cards like 9, 10, jack, 7, 8, 9 that could give him straights, 2 pairs, or sets. Don't think he's really ever going to have a 3 here unless it's ace 3. Possibly could have pocket deuces, but all in all, I'm loving this board. I bet 250, and he does make the call. Now, the flop was great. The turn card, however, is very bad. It's the ace of clubs. Not my favorite card, obviously. It's an overcard to our pair. Ace 5, ace 4 gets there. 4-5 gets there for a straight. I thought about betting small here, possibly to get him to call with weaker, smaller pocket pairs, or maybe get him to call with backdoor flush draws that he picked up. But ultimately, I decided to check over to him, and he checks this one back. Going to the river, which is the queen of spades, over $1,000 in the middle. I have to figure out what I want to do. Should I bet here or should I check? This is when my decision is very player dependent. If I was up against a very fishy call stationy player who would call a bet with pocket 8s or pocket 9s, I would bet this river for thin value. But against this particular player, I don't think he's ever hero calling with those hands. So I decided to check over to him. He doesn't instantly check back, and eventually he does decide to bet $700 back over to me. This is a pretty nasty spot. I was loving the flop, not really liking the turn, but once he checked back the turn, I felt pretty good about my hand. I have to now think, is he ever bluffing in this situation? I feel like if he was bluffing, he would have to be bluffing with some medium pocket pairs that he called with pre-flop, called on the flop with, checked back the turn, and now is turning those hands into a bluff on the river. It's very possible he tried to float me on the flop with hands with backdoor equity, and now he's using this ace or queen as a scare card. However, this board really favors my 3-bet range. I can have aces, I can have queens, I can have ace king, I can have ace queen, I can have all sorts of strong hands. I actually consider maybe turning my hand into a bluff here. I thought at the time I could potentially put him in a really tough spot with hands like ace 10, ace jack, ace 4, ace 5 if I jam all in here for his last $1,600, but I reluctantly fold. I don't feel like he's ever folding an ace if I go all in. Don't think he's ever bluffing in the situation, so I fold the kings. He doesn't show his hands, so he probably had it this time. Moving on to the next hand where there's a call for 25. Jack 9 of clubs on the button. I bump it up here 4x to $100. Straddle makes to call and the limper makes to call. We go 3 ways to the flop. 10, 4, 5, 2 clubs. When it checks to me, I check this one back. Turn card 8 of spades, now bringing in a straight draw for us. Any 7, any queen will give us a straight. We still have an overcard to the 10 on the board. The straddle now leads into the field for a $100 bet. Limper makes to fold, and the action's back over on me. I now have a decision whether I want to call this small bet of $100, or maybe if I want to turn my hand into a semi-bluff and raise. Feel like a raise wouldn't make too much sense, so I call trying to hit one of my outs, but I miss. The river card, however, is the ace of diamonds. My opponent now slows down and checks over to me, and now I have another decision. Should I check behind Jack high, or should I go for it here and try to get him to fold out a smaller pair? I do decide to bluff here on the river, but for a smaller sizing, $225 back over to my opponent. Once he bets 1/3 size of the pot on the turn, I don't even think he has a 10x hand. I feel like a lot of the time he's going to have an 8x hand, or possibly a hand like Queen Jack that I'm trying to get to fold. I don't feel like I have to go too big here. I could easily have an ace in this situation. I could have a hand like Ace 4 or Ace 5 for 2 pair, Ace 3, Ace Deuce. For top pair, I could have maybe floated him on the turn with an Ace King, Ace Queen hand. If I did have top pair or 2 pair, I'd want to go small here, trying to get paid off. This is kind of like reverse psychology. I want him to think that I'm probably never bluffing here, even though I am. Let's say I overbet the size of the pot. He may be curious and think I'm bluffing. I'm trying to bet nice and small, trying to make it seem like I'm wanting to call, but in reality, I don't want to call at all. I want him to fold his hand. I'm not really in love with this bluff, however. The pot's pretty small. I have some blockers of hands that I want him to have. I feel like I could have just checked this one back. Don't really like going for it here. And eventually, my opponent does call. I show the Jack high, and he shows 8-6 of spades for a 3rd pair call down. Very good call by my opponent, and we lose a small one here, bluffing it off with the Jack 9. Exactly 1 orbit later, I'm on the button with Ace Jack of Hearts. Cutoff raises to 75. I call. This is a hand I can mix between 3-betting and calling. This time I call on the button. Small blind calls, so we go 3 ways to deuce, 4, 5, 1 heart, 2 diamonds. I flop a gut shot straight draw, 2 overcards, backdoor flush draw. Pretty good hand for me, I would say. When the small blind checks, initial raiser and the cutoff checks, I decide to put out a semi-bluff here of $110. Small blind calls 110, and the cutoff calls 110, and the turn card is a 3 of clubs. Now I make a straight, however, any 6 will make a straight as well. Either of my opponents can easily have a 6 in this situation once I get 2 calls on the flop, so I elect to do a little pot control here and check back the turn, and the river card's the 10 of clubs. I have basically the 3rd nuts here. A 6 makes a straight, 6, 7's the ultimate nuts, and an ace is a straight as well. Small blind now leads right out for a $325 bet. I could be losing here to a 6, but I could also be chopping to an ace. So I decide to call, and unfortunately we are up against 6-8 of clubs for a higher straight, and we lose yet again another pot. Things aren't going too well in the start of this session, down about $1,500 or $2,000 so far. About 2 hours go by, I get moved over to the main game. I end up winning about $1,000 back from winning small to medium-sized pots. Before picking up Ace King in the small blind, I raise to 75. Big blind 3 bets me next to act at $225, and the straddle makes to fold. This is a pretty easy 4-bet spot. Out of position, small blind versus big blind could probably make it around $600 or $700, but this particular player is a European pro. I'm not sure if he'll call off super light here pre-flop. With that said, I just make the call for $225. I want to keep him in the pot with weaker hands that we have completely crushed, but it doesn't really matter. On a Queen 8-5 rainbow board, I totally miss here with Ace King. Of course, I check over to him. He bets out $150, and versus this sizing, I could fold. I could maybe check raise sometimes, but that seems like kind of a punt. I do think I could sometimes call here out of position, given the fact that I have 2 overcards. I could still sometimes have the best hand with Ace King. I could potentially bluff depending on what the runout brings later on. So I call, I float out of position and get rewarded on the King of Clubs turn. I now have improved to top pair top kicker. My opponent probably doesn't think I'm going to have ace-king very often because I would most likely 4-bet that pre-flop. I check over to him, hoping he'll continue to bluff if he is, but he slows down now and checks this turn. River card 6, and now I have to decide whether I want to lead out now with my top pair top kicker or if I want to check over to him. I'm trying to think what is the best way to make money here. Well, if he does have a queen x hand like ace queen, queen jack, and I check to him, maybe he'll go for thin value. If he has a weaker king x hand, he's definitely going to be betting this river if I check to him. If he does have a bluffing hand, maybe something like ace 10, ace jack, or something with very little showdown, he might try to bluff this river, and then I can just make an easy call. So ultimately, I decide to check over to him on this river, and he does bet for a $500 sizing. The pot was around $700 before this. He's betting about 2/3 size of the pot. Action back over on me. Top pair, top kicker seems like a pretty easy call, right? I'm about to flick in the call for $500, but then I think to myself, maybe this could be a spot that I could go for a very, very thin value check raise on the river. The way this hand is played out, I feel like we're just going to have the best hand here almost 100% of the time. If we remember on the flop, my opponent bet and I made the call. On the turn a king came, I checked to him and he checked back on the king. Now we can assume that he's probably not checking the turn with two pairs or sets or even a hand like pocket aces. So once he checks the turn and now bets this river, he's pretty much capped to a one pair hand. I have the best one pair hand on this board, so I decide to go for a very thin check raise here. I bump it up to $1,700. Now, there is a possibility we could be beat here. He could have a hand like 5-6, 8-6 for two pair, 9-7 for a straight. However, I don't think he's 3-betting those hands pre-flop. I think he would just call here in position. It's possible he maybe has pocket aces that he pot controlled and checked back on the turn. If we're value owning ourselves here, we're going to lose $1,700. But in poker, you got to go for thin value in these kind of spots. If you guys have been watching my videos over the last 2 years, you know that in the past, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, especially on live streams, I've been the complete opposite of going for thin value. I've usually played somewhat scared money, a little bit nitty. I haven't gone for these kind of spots in the past, but I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to push myself. I'm trying to go for thin spots in a game where the edges are increasingly getting smaller. I feel like I have the best hand. If I'm wrong here and he has me beat, well, I guess that's just what happens in poker. You got to have a bankroll for these kind of situations. I'm going for it here. Extra thin value on the river. Let's see if our read was right and we get paid off by a worse hand, or maybe we just value owned ourselves and lost an extra $1,700. My opponent eventually calls. Ace King is good to take down over a $4,000 pot. I'm really happy with the way I played that hand. I don't really feel like that all the time. I feel like I make a lot of mistakes when I'm playing poker, but this one I feel pretty good about. I'm glad I didn't value own myself. After taking down over a $4,000 pot, we're now actually up on the session around $1,000. I switched seats to get a better viewpoint for the video. Pocket nines I raised to 60. Small blind 3-bets me to $200. This particular player I feel like is always going to have a very strong hand when he 3-bets to a small sizing out of position. He probably just call with a lot of hands. He most likely has aces, kings, or queens, or ace king. So I call to try to hit a set, and I don't hit a set. It's an 8-4-4 flop, but I do flop an overpair. He bets $150, and I feel like in this situation, I'm going to have to call once and then reevaluate on the turn, which is what I do. Well, the fourth card is very good for pocket nines. It's a black 9, 9 of spades, giving me top full house. And now my opponent who 3-bet me pre-flop, bet this flop, continues now for $225. I think to myself, should I raise or should I just call? If he has an overpair like aces and kings and queens and I raise here, he's most likely never folding. But if I call, I risk a scared card coming out on the river that could potentially kill my action. Let's say he's got pocket jacks and the river's a king or a queen, or maybe he's got kings and the river's an ace. It could slow him down and he may not pay me off. but with top full house here, I feel like I'm just going to have to call, allow him to keep bluffing if he is bluffing, and just kind of risk the fact that a scare card might come out. So I make the call for 225, and unfortunately we get the worst river card in the deck, Ace of Hearts. This is exactly the kind of card I didn't want to see. It could slow down and kill my action, but he doesn't seem too scared about this ace. He continues firing for $325. It's possible he could have pocket aces and it's full house over full house, but can't be scared of monsters under the bed. I jam all in for his last $800, and he snap calls me. Feel like I could be beat here. I show pocket nines, but he taps the table, looks back at his cards, and mucks, and we stack our opponent and win over a $3,000 pot here with a full house. All the chips are being pushed in our direction. It's funny how the swings are in poker. When I first sat down in this session, I couldn't win a hand. I was down a couple $1,000s. We had to work really hard going for thin value there with ace king to get paid off. And now this hand was super easy. We just turn a full house. We get paid off, stack our opponent. We're now up about $2,000 on the session, leading in to the last hand of the night. And what better way to end this video than with pocket aces? I raised a 60 over a $25 straddle. Small blind's the only player to make the call. We go heads up in position to 10-7 deuce 2 clubs. Fairly great board for pocket aces. I don't have the ace of clubs. He could easily have the ace high flush draw here. I bet big $100 into around $140, $150 pot. My opponent makes a pretty quick call. Turn card complete brick for a diamond. Shouldn't change anything. Shouldn't improve his hands. It does bring in a flush draw though. My opponent checks, and with around $1,100 left in his stack, I size up here on the turn to $325, looking to shove all in on the river, depending on what comes out. Now my opponent goes into the tank for a very long time. I'm thinking to myself that he's thinking whether he wants to either go with his hand here on the turn or fold. I think he understands that if he calls his 325, he's most likely going to have to call his entire stack on the river, and after thinking for over 2 minutes, my opponent decides to jam all in.
Do you go to the gym?
Yeah, like 4 or 5 times a week.
Oh, okay.
That's it?
One more action, guys.
Aces.
When I snap called the small blind's jam, he asked me if I had a set, which made me worried he could possibly have 2 pair, but aces are good. They hold up to win another $3,000+ pot. Early on in this session, I was down. I couldn't win a hand, but we clawed back. I kept grinding, and just like that, back-to-back, big wins in some big spots. Full house and aces, and after a bunch of hours of playing, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I miss my dog. It's time to go home. I end up racking up my chips, heading to the cage, and cashing out for the night. Alright guys, that is it for this one. Finishing up a late night session here at Hard Rock in Hollywood, Florida. It's super humid out tonight. You can see my car behind me is just wet. Hasn't even rained yet. It's like 92% humidity. I'm trying not to sweat while I'm talking to the camera. Interesting session. We started off a little bit bad, losing some hands, couldn't really get anything going, and then ace king in a 3-bet pot. I check raised on the river to $1,700. Got paid off, super thin value there. Then pocket nines turned to full house, stacked my opponent. Pocket aces, stacked my opponent there. Ended up winning $4,200 on the night, so I'll take it. Good Saturday night for us playing poker so far this year. This has been by far my best poker year ever since 2018, since I started. March, April, and May, all consecutively back to back to back. I had $20,000+ months just playing poker. So that doesn't include the other things I've got going on. So far this year, I've been running well. I feel like I've been playing well, getting into some good games. Everything's been going well. Pretty good year so far. I'm a little bit worried though. I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to start running bad. I don't want to lose $20,000 in the month. Hopefully it can keep going. I am excited too because I'm going out to Vegas in early July. And then I also have another announcement for you guys that's going to be going down like mid-July. I'll release that in a little bit, but I'm grateful for you guys. Thank you guys for watching my videos. Hope you enjoyed this one. Please like, comment down below, and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see ya.